Okay, so welcome to the Deep Dive into Death, episode 6. I'm your host, Malia Bayich, and you can find me here at findingrealm.com. So, a little bit of housekeeping. It took me a little bit of time to get my website back. So, I've got a bit of a splash page going up now because now I'm learning how to actually build it. So, technology is not my favorite thing. However, I must say, I've been utilizing technology and ChatGPT to have really helped take some of this information to the next level, especially in Canada because so much stuff is censored. So my website is www.findingrealm.com, and you can also find me on X, YouTube, and Rumble for as long as however I'll last on there without getting cut off. Um, just FYI. And then, of course, unless you're in my town for booking for massage, but other than that, things that I do for virtual is death education, grief support, advanced care planning, ritual, ceremony, legacy. And once again, you'd have to be where I live for uh, personal at the bedside or visual, we call it. So before we get to that one, I just want to hold on. So one of the things that I've been learning over this last month and a bit is funding. So all throughout the summertime, I was trying to write a bunch of grants. And to be quite honest, I don't really have faith in the government in the grant way because when we start in one angle, because when we start looking at the funding and the money just in general, we know that like Canada, North America, probably all over the world is pretty much bankrupt in one angle. So I see this in the school as well when parents are thinking we want this and that, but they can't do anything because they don't have any money. And then unfortunately, when it comes to like a grassroots charity that I'm partnered with in one angle, all the really big ones, come before a lot of what we can provide. So we're it's a challenge. But it also got me to thinking that if people really started understanding how some of this is and created, maybe we could switch a little bit of the consciousness on where the funding and how the money goes so that, I guess I could say when the empire officially is recognized that it's fell, there are some layers of integrity that's left over. So this leads me to my next slide here. So I'll make this bigger in just a second. But one of the things that I've also been learning is I follow this one guy named Cliff High. I don't know if any of you know him, but you should follow him. But I've been watching kind of what he was doing. So I started to take ChatGPT and want to plunk in a bunch of death information in Statistics Canada. And so what I was finding was that Statistics Canada is heavily censored. I mean, right? And especially now with all these censorship laws. So it was really challenging to start pulling up information. One of, I guess we could say, the rabbit holes that I've got into, which has become like a little bit fun, really fun, will come up in more shows because I've been finding that I can go into like the court systems and plunk that in and start to get some of these results. So this next little bit of the presentation that I'm showing you is me going into Statistics Canada with ChatGPT, and I'm specifically only asking about age 65 plus. So I'm not asking anything regarding disease and illness or in the middle-aged generation or our youth. Those will come up because within Statistics Canada, we can get a bit more of an easier read. Plus, I also felt that it was a really great spot to start for the average person because it's not so debating knowing that when somebody age wise comes to the end of life. And yeah, like I say, in a few more other episodes, we'll start getting into middle age and children. But to be quite honest, you can go into chat, like, and encourage you guys to do this. You can go bring up Statistics Canada and start asking ChatGPT about the kids and how kids are dying, and it will not give you the information. You have to dig further. So I found that kind of interesting. So I'm just going to change this. Oh no, that's better. So when we're looking at death in Canada over the next 20 years for age 65 and plus, that's it, no disease, no illness, just based on age. We know that this is an estimated population of approximately 25%. We know that the current death rate is approximately 7.9 deaths per thousand people. And I'll show you in the chart what it looks like, and it's increasing. So once again, on age only. So we're not adding any diseases yet or anything like that. So it's projected to increase from 2024 to 2040, up to 9 to 10 deaths. So it's just this little slow growth. And when we look at the growth in the chart to come, it's 7%. So when we look at key factors influencing what could change 65 and over, pandemics, public health, disease, illness, which I don't have in this right now because we're going really grassroots here, people. So this we have, is what the projected death rate looks like from 2024 to 2044. 7% growth, 65 plus. So, I mean, if this is on the rise, if you're an investor, this is a growing industry. If you want to be a death doula, this is a growing industry. Not that people want to talk about death as an industry, and I know that using it that way makes a lot of people really uncomfortable, but it is, right? And we have to start being able to look at it in these ways in order to start changing it. And Thomas Sowell, I don't know if you guys know who he is, and I'm not going to have his quote right, and I didn't pull it up here, but he basically, one of the things that stuck in my mind is if you want to be able to change things, you have to start understanding the policies and the game that's played and what we're up against in order to start making bits of shifts and change. And this is kind of where AI comes in really cool, because you can start looking at legalities and plunking things in. Like, my mind has exploded over this. It's awesome, super awesome, especially for stuff like this. So why is it so hard to get funding in death support? So death is a huge cultural taboo for Canadians, Americans, North Americans. We don't see it the same way, because in the early 1900s, when the Rockefellers took over the medical institutions, we started institutionalizing everything. And there wasn't the same level of population. So we avoid it culturally. It's not something that is like, either people are comfortable talking with it or they're totally not. And people are also often in denial of their own mortality, thinking that it is only these 65 and plus that die. But in reality, in Canada anyways, 1 in 4 babies don't make it. The average person in palliative and hospice is 30 to 65, because often the 65-year-olds in Canada anyways, long-term facilities are quite common here. So we're in a lot of denial of our mortality. And because we're in such a heavily censored country when it comes to information, we're not talking about it. So there's a lack of awareness and understanding. So there's limited public awareness, and they're not familiar with the concept of death, or even what a death doula is, or how they can help. So without these understandings, we often assume that the medical industry is going to be there for you when you're dying. But dying is holistic, not medical. So as long as you're taking a life-saving treatment, that system will be there for you. But once you decide that you're ready to just naturally die, if that's your choice, it's not there. So we have a major misconception about the services that are provided. Even when I look at my local community, it's very interesting because one person will believe one thing and another person will believe another. So part of what I would like to start doing in this, and being a bit more of a death educator, I suppose you can call me, but I think it's just more having experience in the system. And I like to stand up for the underdog quite a bit, is that, we have to start understanding the roles. And one of the things that I'm also learning is that, say, like a regular paying Canadian pension person, like somebody who's paid into their pension their whole time, gets a different category of, let's say, funding than, say, somebody with diverse abilities, because they weren't paying into the Canadian pension plan. They don't get the same services. And then once again, when we take BC, Alberta, Ontario, every province is totally different. And then depending on if you have insurance or don't have insurance, is once again, you have a whole other loop. So the consistency across Canada isn't the same. Healthcare funding priorities. So the healthcare system funds on curative measures, cancer treatments, chemo, dialysis. What they don't often fund for is palliative care or hospice. I mean, palliative care and hospice do get some funding, and there are foundations that will put money towards it. But like the CEO for the charity that I'm working with, she was writing grants and they were funding rainbow benches over dying people. And nothing against however that went, but people are dying. We should not have to be trying to fight for funding. It should just naturally be there because we're human. So, palliative care itself and hospices are often underfunded for what they should do. For example, when my mother-in-law died, my father-in-law got offered grief support through our local hospice. That's cool, but he had only 6 sessions. Well, he's an old farm boy. He was just getting started by the 6th session because it took him a while to figure out his own trust with the grief support that he had, let alone that person was changing. And that's no fault on the hospices, because they can only do what they can do, and they have a limit amount of people that work there and a limit amount of people who volunteer. It takes somebody special to be in this industry because it's hardcore. So when it comes to funders or how people want to invest, it's an unproven economic value. So investors have difficulty quantifying the impact, because once somebody's died, what are you going to do? Go give them a survey? So you can't do that, right? And then depending on what we talked about just a few minutes ago, we don't have that level of grief support. And since it's such a taboo topic, nobody wants to talk about it. So it becomes this really rather challenging part. The silver lining in what's happening right now, though, I will say, is that people are ready to talk. And those charts I showed you earlier, they're way bigger when we start adding disease and illness into this. So, like, my last month has been huge when it comes to grief support with people and the movements forward, and like school. Like, finally get an interview with the school board. I'm the most rebel when it comes to stuff like this. So this is kind of interesting. This is interesting, but they're ready to talk, right? Because it's so big. What's happening right now it's huge. So people are ready to address this, because everywhere we look, I know somebody who's going through some level of grief, trauma, life-limiting illness. Somebody's just died. Somebody's took meds. So for investors, previously, it's been an unclear rate of return. What's happening now, because everybody is starting to become more aware, and we can't fight what's coming, let alone if we just take this age 65 plus. So you saw the chart, right? It's even that alone is undeniable, because it's the largest level of population. So there's a stigma and a lack of political will. No big surprise here. We don't have a lot of politicians that are advocating for death support. Oh, hold on. My dad. I'll call him back. We don't have a lot of politicians that are advocating for death support right now. We have in Canada the argument back and forth and the political debate around maids. And I'm not pro nor against the situation because I think people should be able to do what they want. I certainly don't want somebody to tell me what to do. But that conversation has really taken over instead of us actually putting funding towards giving somebody a quality death, not just a euthanization, because we aren't supporting anybody in any other angle. That's kind of where um for me, I have a moment. If you want maids, go for it, but you shouldn't. It's horrible that somebody feels like they have to take maids because there is no other option. And yeah, so the lack of lobbying and advocacy, right? So we need, well, I guess that's kind of what I'm doing right now, starting to lobby these politicians and political avenues that we need more in a different angle. But this now means that I'm having to learn how to do policies and bylaw, which is actually kind of interesting and fun, I will say. But I'm a Capricorn, I like that kind of stuff. So, and then insurance and payment issues. So, some insurances will cover certain things, some won't. Once again, it totally depends on what you bought, and nobody's consistent in that angle. I don't know how to speak on insurances that way. I got no knowledge, so you'd have to do your own research there. And then payment issues. One of the things that's really hard is that, say, when you're in a personal or like a small town hospice, or palliative care like what we have, you only get a certain amount of services because they only have so much. So this is kind of where, like, Home Hospice Association, the charity that I work for, it's a very grassroots charity. We're looking to fill these gaps a little bit and to be able to give a bit of a financial relief for people and some services for free because it's not out there, right? But most people struggle with paying out of their pocket right now. And that's the other thing. To hire a death doula, you have to just pay. And our services are of value. And I'm not going to, for myself, going to undervalue myself, because when I look at the quality of work and what we have to do, it's hard. It's not easy. That's why I had to take a little bit of time off so that I could really sort through and make sure that I was staying grounded as possible, because this shit is heavy. And then nonprofit and charitable funding challenges. So, Home Hospice Association is a small grassroots charity that ever since the last 4 years, it's grown across Canada. Our problem is that A, we're grassroots, and B, we're up against people, for example, like the We Charity, who just funneled a bunch of money and used it for a whole bunch of corrupt needs, just try to be polite, X, Y, and Z. So a lot of people, like, I know there's a local charity, well, it's actually cross Canada, I won't give money to because I know what they're up to and it's not good. So when we have small grassroots ones, it's not that easy. So we don't get the same recognition because a lot of these other ones have, like, for lack of a better word, ruined it for a lot of us. This, I have faith in changing, though, and stuff like that. As the empire crumbles, that will become more clear where you want to put your money, stuff like that. But in the meantime, that becomes a really big challenge. So the emerging nature of the field. So in North America, death doulas, end of life doulas. Some people like to say end of life. It's more softer. I really like the word death, so I like calling myself a death doula. But Either or, the world's word is interchangeable, what you want to call us. In North America, it's relatively new, so not really many people know what it is. So it's a hard service for people to recognize the value for. Um, it's also an unregulated service. One of my favorite things, because that gives me as an entrepreneur more freedom to actually be able to help somebody the way that I know best. But so, because it's an unregulated service, when you look at the medical industry, they don't want to acknowledge us the same way. I was up against this in my massage world for years, and an RMT in Canada is not the same in each province. So for me, it was like, well, I'm not going to go spend 50 grand and I can't even be recognized all across Canada with the student loan debt, right? So once again, this is just one of these categories that is going to grow via word of mouth and how much appreciation people feel when they're the space in between and the gap has a little bit of explanation. And that's my job. So I'm not replacing the medical profession or stopping anybody from wanting pain management or anything like that. A lot of times it's just helping with the paperwork so they know where to go. Sometimes you have to wait 2-3 weeks before you even get a diagnosis, but you know somebody's dying. So 17% of Canadians will be supported by the medical section, where 83%, make sure my math's right, are dying in the space in between. So the space in between is a really big gap, and there does need something to be changed. In Canada, North America, I don't know about the rest of the world, but for surely where we are, we have a focus on living well and not dying well. So typically, people, public health doctors will focus on the pharmaceutical or how to keep you alive, but not how to help you choose to die well. So dying well is an art. It's not something that you decide to do when you're at the end of your life and shit hits your fan. And yeah, that I don't know. Maybe some people get. Nobody that I've seen's figured out how to die well in that category because they avoided the topic so much before. So dying well really starts to come at understanding when you're not in a position of having a life-limiting illness on how to prepare yourself and to not take your life for granted in a certain way. Because I mean, I could go tomorrow, right? And then personally, I think you start living a lot better, realizing how precious that your life could actually be. So, one of the most profound books that I can say so far that I've read when it comes to dying and how to die well is a book called Die Wise by Stephen Jenkinson. Um, you can find him on YouTube as well. I highly recommend watching some of his videos. But when I read this book, when my husband's parents were dying and my stepdad, it was mind blowing because I'm sitting here in the medical system. Maybe one day I'll post like I had to do a book report on this book, and my stepdad literally died as I wrote the last sentence of my doula certification for this book. It was powerful, but I really do recommend you reading it because he'll take kind of what I just said and say it all in a way better way. It's a hard book to read. His language is so deep, and almost every few sentences you have to stop and just like really think about what he's saying. But it's a really huge value. Um, and then I think that's my last slide. Yep. So we can go back. So that is pretty much the start of that's pretty much what I have to say for this episode. I know it took a little while to come back. Like I said at the beginning, I've been knee deep in all kinds of things right now that are going on. So I'll do my best to get back and to be a little bit more regular in these videos. But if not, come the new year, I'll have my foundation set up. All these doors just keep opening for me right now. And so I don't like to say no to a really good opportunity either. So it's just, I'm finding ways to actually get money besides trying to get it from the government. So it's allowing me to actually put support systems within my own community first. yeah, I guess other than that, thank you. I guess you go like, share, subscribe, however all the shit works on social media. Um, and I'll see you all next time. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.